This episode of Headlock Talk is brought to you by Austin-based company Naturally Hemp's and their new line of CBD gummies. These gummies are made with 100% baked-in, pharmaceutical-grade, non-isolate-based CBD. What we're talking about here is the Entourage Effect. The Entourage Effect refers to the stronger effect you get when combining multiple cannabinoids together, as opposed to just CBD. Full-spectrum CBD, or CBD distillate, tends to be more potent and lasts longer, which is what we're talking about here. Unlike some other brands that use a spray-on CBD, Naturally Hemp CBD distillate is baked in, so you know you're getting the full dose with each gummy. I personally use them for all kinds of things, like sleep aid or muscle pain. And did I mention they taste great? They got 5 flavors, strawberry, green apple, lemon lime, watermelon, and get this, the orange flavor has vitamin C in it. Ooh. So if this sounds like something you could go for, head over to your nearest Create a Sig vape shop and pick yours up today to see for yourself the difference Naturally Hemp's gummies can make in your life.
On this week's episode of Headlock Talk, I am joined by my good friends Jpq and JD from Redleaf Retrocast as we discuss the very fun, often entertaining, and mysterious world of Joshi wrestling. Alrighty, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Headlock Talk presents Wrestling Lore. I am, of course, the Texas gentleman Tanner Pruitt, and today I'm gonna get schooled. I'm gonna get schooled hard on this subject because I'm not gonna lie. I've been a pro wrestling fan for about 25 years. I've seen a lot. I've experienced a lot of different matches. I've watched in a lot of different countries. What I can't say is that I'm an expert on this next subject, but fortunately enough, we have two of the premier experts in all of the world coming to you today to present this episode and to help school me through what is Joshi wrestling, really. It's been exploding for years. I'm so pleased that I have our two special guests. Of course, guest number one, you know him from the Redleaf Retrocast. It is JD. JD, how are you doing today?
Oh, it's great. I'm so happy you invited me or allowed me to be a part of this. As you know, if you've listened to my podcast or the Patreon, we cover an incredible amount of Joshi wrestling history and the modern stuff as well. So I'm very happy to be here.
Well, I'm so excited that you're here because when our next guest told me, he was like, "Hey, let's get him in," I was like, "Absolutely, let's talk about it." And speaking of said next guest. You know him from his own podcast streams. He's also recently retired, but I'm bringing him back here. The world's number one Swansea City fan, as well as probably the guy that really introduced me into Joshi wrestling. None other than Big Paws on the Pup, Jpq. How are you doing this morning?
Good, man. Appreciate it. Good morning to you. Good morning to JD. And happy to be here. Happy to do a little Joshi primer for Headlock Talk. I mean, it's been a minute since you and I have chatted outside of the beautiful game. So happy to jump back into the wrestling side of things and happy that we're doing it on my favorite type of wrestling, which is Joshi wrestling.
So gentlemen, let's start there. For those uninitiated, what is Joshi wrestling? What does Joshi wrestling mean to you? And JPQ, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to JD.
Yeah, I where it starts with me first is the consistency within the rosters of the technical prowess of each wrestler. So, you know, it's something where whether you're dealing with someone who's a teenager or somebody who's, you know, closer to their third decade in professional wrestling, the fundamentals are the key to every wrestler that wrestles this kind of style. And the styles they marry, right? It's not just high speed. It's not just powerful, stiff shots, right? It's a blend. And really what it is to me at the end of the day is a commitment to the fundamentals, a commitment to storytelling, both inside and outside the ring, and a professionalism of taking care of the opponent across from you and making them look good. And so I don't think that's better represented than in Joshi. And I think the core values and the core fundamentals are something that, depending on who you're watching, when you're watching, where you're watching, is consistent from one wrestler to the other.
I mean, wow, that's a a pretty big explanation for sure. And I think I like how you elaborated on like the aesthetics of Joshi wrestling specifically, because I think that's a lot of why you see, WWE bring in stars from Stardom, for example, and we'll get to Stardom here very shortly, I'm sure, and but also AEW bring in a lot of Joshi talent because of that aesthetic, right? Like it's that style. Where it not only blends, but it's also about, hey, you got to take care of the other person, make the other person look good. It's give and take. It's a 50-50 kind of thing.
Yeah, you do see that with like the EOs and Saraya. She begins her journey, and Kyrie when she was there, and Asuka, is their style is very unique to them, but they're able to work with everybody else's styles, right? And where it may not always jive 100%, you can get through it more times than not. So again, that just speaks to how much they wrestle, how much they're willing to work with the people across from them, and then how they can blend their style with a multitude of different styles.
Cool. JD, kind of along the same question here, but I'm going to add a little bit of extra chutzpah here. So
chutzpah. All right.
Chutzpah.
Bring on the vocabulary. Okay.
So when you think of Stardom, I mean, obviously, I want to know kind of what not just Stardom, but like when we think about Joshi wrestling, I mean, what does that mean to you? And I guess to help again those newly initiated or those trying to seek out or find Joshi wrestling, I guess what companies are there that people should be like weighing up upon consideration?
Well, one thing to take into consideration is what kind of presentation and style of wrestling appeals to you the most. And that's how I approach a lot of these companies when you first dive into them. And also ease of access. I think that's very important. And the two companies that immediately come to mind are Stardom and Tokyo Joshi Pro Wrestling. You can easily find Stardom via Stardom World, has a streaming service. They have adopted a pay-per-view model over the last year or so. But if you want to conserve your money, then all you have to do is wait a few days, and you get that pay-per-view for free, just included into their streaming service, which is very affordable, depending where you live. It's going to be about $10 or less a month in United States dollars. And then Tokyo Joshi Pro is available via Wrestle Universe, much more character-based driven promotion, which has an increase in ability in their in-ring. So for many years, this promotion was very much behind on the in-ring skill compared to a lot of other companies, where they made up for a lot of that in their storytelling and in-ring characters. But on Wrestle Universe, also about $10 a month, and you get included with that DDT and now the aforementioned Noah, which is very popular among a lot of Puro wrestling fans, at least in the West. So these two companies immediately stand out as the easiest to access. And if you're more into, say, a New Japan style, Stardom is probably going to be closer to you. If you're more into a wacky, you still get the in-ring. I mean, don't get me wrong. I did bury this promotion for a number of years because its in-ring wasn't as good as some other Joshi promotions. But over the last, I would say 18 months, I'd say they're just as good as a lot of other promotions out there in that. So if you're into a more character-based story promotion, maybe that appeals more to a lot of Western fans since that's kind of their storytelling. Tokyo Joshi Pro is worth checking out.
Sweet. I mean, that's a really good place to start. So we've got two promotions right here on the table that we know about so far. We've got Stardom, of course, and we've got Tokyo Joshi Pro. JD, I'm going to stay with you for a second more here. Again, it sounded like you were. I think a lot of people know about Stardom. Tokyo Joshi Pro might be a little bit. I mean, that's new to me. I've heard of it, but I haven't checked out anything. So, talk to me a little bit about Tokyo Joshi Pro and maybe what's different, what differentiates it from Stardom.
Sure. So Tokyo Joshi Pro, it's like I said before, it's very much character-based promotion, much more story-driven, and they've started a lot of English commentary as well. Stardom's just started diving into that a little bit recently. So if you want their English commentary, you'll have to probably buy the pay-per-views. But for TJPW, they got guys like Chris Brooks and some of the guys from Noah and MMA backgrounds hilariously calling a Tokyo Joshi Pro match where it's a lot of just wacky, kooky characters. You got superheroes. You got, there's one character who pretends to be a superhero. There's another where she's a big kaiju fan, including her nickname, that's Shoko. Where this appeal might come into a lot of wrestling fandom is they pretty much have a connection with AEW. Kenny Omega and company has a big DDT background. That's where Kenny Omega kind of cut his teeth in the wrestling world. So him and the owner of a lot of that, Sanshiro Takagi, they have a more or less deal struck to just kind of keep it a little bit loose. So you see Yuka Sakazaki in AEW coming over. We've seen Shoko Nakajima before. Maki Ito is in Tokyo Joshi Pro. So these are your some of your biggest names that you're probably familiar with if you're an AEW fan. And Yuka is now on excursion, and she's showing up on Dynamite next week. So that's good to see. Good to hopefully they can utilize her better. But Tokyo Joshi Pro, character-based promotion, in-rings on the up and up, and the promotions on the up and up from a business perspective. I like to approach Joshi wrestling probably a lot differently than a lot of other fandoms out there where business is important. You'd like to see your wrestling promotions stay in business. Maybe more people start watching and can join in on the fandom. So Tokyo Joshi Pro has, over the last 18 months, increased their business to be the number 2 promotion. They're running Ota Ward coming up. They got a King of the Ring style tournament, a New Japan Cup style tournament. Pick your other promotion that you can make a reference to. It's a knockout tournament, and the number 1 contender will win that. So they do have tournaments just like any other promotion out there that you enjoy, and I highly recommend it.
Sweet. I mean, like that sounds awesome. And I mean, for anybody who needs an excuse to go and check out DDT, which is a lot of fun. I mean, if you go back through their archives, or Noah, I mean, if you're going to get Tokyo Joshi Pro as well, I mean, definitely take the time, from what it sounds like, from what you're saying, to go and check out Tokyo Joshi Pro, because I'm familiar with a lot of those names that you're bringing up, and if you haven't seen their content in Japan, I mean, it sounds like it's definitely worth a shot. JPQ, I'm about to open up a big can of worms, I feel, but I have to ask.
Yeah.
Stardom. Tell me about Stardom.
So, I mean, what's there to say that I haven't said already for years now? Starts with #Watch Stardom, first and foremost.
Okay.
If you can, stardom-world.com. To JD's point, a little under $10 a month. And you get probably the most polished product in all of Joshi, right? It's the big leagues in a lot of ways. They're backed by Bushiroad. They have some of the best talent that you're going to find in the world, whether it be Mayu Iwatani or Momo Watanabe. Julia is just, leaps and bounds headed for superstardom. Shori is one of the best workers, if not one of the most consistent, hard-hitting workers, best striker in all of professional wrestling today. Tam Nakano, best bout machine. She's having a tremendous year. And the most interesting thing about Stardom, in my opinion, is the fact that from top to bottom, they have the most complete roster. From a depth perspective, whether it be Azumi or Starlight Kid, who's, they've been wrestling now for a good amount of time. They're only 18, 19, 20 years old, and they started wrestling when they were 11, 12, 13, 14. And so they've got years underneath of them. However, as they kind of come to age in a lot of ways with regards to the roster, we're starting to see them get pushed. So a lot of the, pin eaters as they were coming up, being the fourth of 4 in their factions and things like that, we're beginning to see the growth and the investment and the payoff onto a lot of their rookie years as they begin to climb the roster. So you have this defined main event scene with Julia and Mayu, and Momo kind of is a little bit of the gatekeeper, although JD will tell you that she's a mid-carder. You've got second tier, your Wonder area where you have like your Intercontinental side, where you have your Tams and your Unagis and your Micahs and a lot of these other people coming up, which is really exciting. And then you have this younger crop on top of that, but very veteran in the ring that are beginning to make a name for themselves, and they're beginning to push forward. And we've seen Starlight Kid, Azumi, Natsupoi all begin to kind of climb the ladder a bit, as well. And so it's creating right now in Stardom a tremendous amount of intrigue with regards to picking a favorite and watching that favorite kind of progress in storylines and title fights and faction wars, etc. There's a little bit for everybody. If you're a comedy fan, you got Saki Kashima sitting there, who probably is the best, in my opinion. Sorry, JD, at getting you to laugh and pulling out cheekish wins for her faction. If you're more of the high-profile main event scene, we have Utami Hayashishida as our red belt champion, and she's just putting on banger after banger, including match of the year as of now. Certainly match of the year contender, but as of now, out leader. Utami versus Shuri from from about a month ago. That 5.5 from Dave Meltzer himself with regards to match rating, and whether you believe in match ratings or not is irrelevant, right? That's just telling you this is a match that you want to seek out and find, right?
Yeah.
And that was a really tremendous match and a tremendous pivot in the history of Stardom. And so there's a lot of exciting things happening in Stardom right now, but I think more importantly, they're kind of still on the ground floor, right? Coming out of a new era, or coming out of an old era into a new era with Bushi Road, coming out of the pandemic, right, and kind of getting back into the swing of things here over the course of 2021. What we're seeing is that this promotion isn't ready to begin to plateau. If anything, they're still on the come up, right? And there's a lot of exciting things in the very near future as we get closer to the anniversary show in the spring of next year and the year-end climax at the end of the year. So a lot of interesting things happening at Stardom. It's nice because they do so many shows over the course of the year, right? Every weekend they're doing 3 shows. So from a value perspective, you're not going to get much more for under $10 from the wrestling side than stardom-world.com. But then more importantly than that, you're able to jump in, learn the wrestlers because of the repetitive nature of the matches, and you're going to get fun, exciting matches on top of that. And it lets you kind of ease into it pretty quickly, pick a favorite, and then ride or die with them until you eventually make the switch. So a lot of good things happening in Stardom right now.
Yeah, I mean, you laid down the gauntlet for sure, and I've subscribed to Stardom as well, and actually what got me interested in going back, because I only unsubscribed just because of hey, I just need to free up $10 a month here and there just to do whatever, but the Hayashida and Suri match, I had heard about it and I was like, man, dude, I definitely regret unsubscribing because I want to go back and check this match, So yes, I'm definitely familiar with all of the hype that's coming out of Stardom this year. I do want to kick it over to JD for you to touch on something that JPQ had brought up, which is these faction wars, and both of y'all can go back and forth on this because I'm sure we'll find the answer. We'll find the right answer, but the faction wars are very important to Stardom.
Be careful of that microphone there.
Yeah, I know. I was just waving my hands around. I just start hitting stuff. It's crazy.
All right, so faction warfare.
Yeah, so talk to me about factions and the importance of factions, because while we here in the West probably get oh, well, in AEW there's the Dark Order, and there's the Young Bucks and Kenny, and they've got all those, and then in WWE, I mean, you don't tend to get factions so much. I mean, the last important faction that WWE probably put out was the New Day and the Shield. I mean, those
I guess.
Maybe.
But trio, but okay.
But I guess there's so much more importance on factions.
Yes. So a promotion, two promotions that you can kind of point to that really have a focus on factions is Dragon Gate and New Japan. You know, New Japan, you got Chaos, you got your LIJ, you got your Bullet Club. Dragon Gate, you got your RED, you got your High End, you got your Masquerade. Much of those promotions are very faction based. Dragon Gate tells what New Japan's done is they've created factions over the course of 10 plus years. Dragon Gate tends to have a lot of storylines based on these factions coming and going a lot of the times. That creates kind of a big storyline over disbandment matches. So when you look at Stardom, it's kind of both. I like to kind of poke fun at Stardom. Their blueprint is copying a lot of Dragon Gate when it comes to match style and the faction storytelling, because kind of before the Bushi Road era, they kind of have these disbandment stories a lot of the times, or people coming and leaving the faction quite often. That's very Dragon Gate. But over the last, I would say, couple of years, they've kind of diverted away a little bit from that, and they're kind of going the New Japan route. Maybe a new faction comes in, the better known aforementioned Donna Del Mundo, DDM. That's Julia's faction. That's a new one filled with outsiders. I wouldn't say it's Bullet Club-esque, but the blueprint is kind of there with just the outsider, people from outside the promotion coming in and kind of wrecking shop. A lot of Stardom's booking strategy and its blueprints from here on is kind of focused on keeping your factions away from each other, and that kind of, or faction members away from each other in key matches, which will then be big draws down the line. That's why you got your Julia Shuri. They maybe only wrestle each other once or twice a year in a singles match, whether it be the 5-star or a high-profile singles match. So you're not overwhelmed with just rinse repeat matches over and over again. But you do get a lot of your stories in trios and tag matches between the factions, and they can grow stories out of that. And it doesn't have a lot of these Joshi companies. They kind of only have about 25-ish members of their rosters. So this is also a good way to keep things fresh, but they can consistently work with each other. And that's why you see a work rate just increasing over time. If you cut to Tokyo Joshi Pro, they don't have factions. They just kind of mix and match a lot of the times and go from there. So it's very different strategies in booking and keeping wrestlers fresh away from each other. So Stardom, I think, has the much stronger strategy in a long-term sense.
Oh, okay. I mean, hey, that makes a ton of sense to me as far as like from a booking standpoint. What are we doing with the factions, and how do we use the factions as a mechanism? For sure. JPQ, I'll kick it over to you. Kind of more of a follow-up. What are the factions? I know, obviously JD brought up Donna Del Mundo, right?
Sure.
What are the other factions? Because there's way more than one. Everybody seems to be in a faction in Stardom.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and so to piggyback off of the benefit of factions, regardless of the promotion, it comes down to organization, right? It allows for a subcategory for fans to pay attention to and cling to it first, and then from there it gives you an opportunity to learn the wrestlers, and then kind of, the personality of the faction kind of yields the personality of the wrestler underneath of it to some degree, right? So it's a very handheld way of getting into a promotion, which is another reason why people should #watch Stardom, right? So the factions that we're dealing with, first and foremost, we have Stars, and that's led by Mayu Iwatani. Now, they're a little bit on the weaker end right now because everybody's betraying Mayu and moving on to different promotions. So we'll see if that one sticks around much, much longer. But you have Stars, and that's, again, when we do these primer type of episodes, I like to say that that's kind of like your pop faction, right? That's your Gen Pop. Like that's, it's not so much the mainstream right now, but it's the top 40 hits, right? It's the people that are pretty palatable to everybody. They put a smile on your face. They wear bright colors. They're very good in the ring, don't get me wrong, but they bring a sense of levity to the wrestling promotion. Then you have what I will deem your, let's talk about DDM. We'll go right into DDM. They're the newest faction. Well, they're the second newest faction. They came on the scene late or early last year in 2020, led by Julia. And then what Julia did was that she began to bring in freelancers and or wrestlers from different promotions. So the entire makeup of DDM are people that are outsiders to Stardom, right? And whether they were freelancers in different working different promotions, or they came from Julia herself came from Ice Ribbon, and Natsupoi came from TJPW, and Himika came from Actress Girls, as Micah came from JTO. As everybody started to kind of come in together, what you were seeing is that they were building a faction of world talent or worldly talent based out of different promotions in Japanese wrestling. And so that was very exciting. And I'll tell you that they're kind of your main event faction, right? The people that have been with Stardom for a while kind of look at DDM, the fans this is, as they win all the time, right? And they win all the time because they're very good at what they do, right? And they all kind of serve a purpose, and they're all different styles, and they all work together in various ways. And so you get great variety, but they're all main event quality, right? Or co-main event quality. And so if you're in DDM, expect high personality, right? Expect high wrestling IQ, expect high ring generalship, right? Or type of thing. And expect for them to have the capacity to close a show if need be. And that's kind of the expectation when you're dealing with DDM. So that's number 2. I'll go right into Oedo Tai, which has a sordid history in a lot of ways. The current iteration of Oedo Tai, I always liken to this one is really more of a
call it a legacy faction.
We'll call it a legacy faction. I really look at Oedo Tai in its current iteration, and this may not be fair to a lot of the Oedo Tai fans. It's more of a brand than anything else right now. It's sticker quality. They're living off the namesake of Oedo Tai, but it's the land of misfit toys for me right now. There's a lot of interesting wrestlers from Konami, who's been in a couple different factions now, and former tag team champ and former Artist of Stardom champion. You got Saki Kashima, who is probably the best utility player in all of professional wrestling. That plays a factor, or that does a really good job of kind of being the glue for that faction in these matches. You have a lot of Ruaka and Hina, Rina, who are kind of the rookies coming up through the faction. It's led by Natsuko Tora, who is very what is it?
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly led by Natsuko Tora, who is, she was kind of a mid-card her entire life, and they gave her an opportunity here after kind of being in this trainee role at the end of Kagetsu's run, and she's kind of doing what she can with it. But, they're known for going in there and causing chaos. They go in, and it's not about wins and losses to them. It's about disruption. It's about, inflicting pain and getting DQ'd. And so, there's a lot of inconsistency with them wanting to win certain things, but they have a lot of fun of beating people up. So if you're into that type of wrestler, Oedo Tai is a good spot to be. And then I'll end it with what I'll tell you is not just a legacy faction. No, excuse me, I actually got 2 more. We have Queen's Quest, right, which is a legacy faction started by Io Shirai before she left. The leader being Momo Watanabe. You have your red belt champion and Utami Hayashishida sitting there. You have your future Kota Ibushi-esque wrestler in Saya Kamatani also in that faction, as well as probably the best up-and-comer in Azumi, also beginning to take a lot of strides coming out of the high-speed division and making her name known in the tag team division and trios division. And probably those technical wrestler that you're going to find under the age of 23. They're all in one faction together. And so Queen's Quest, where it's, a lot like DDM, they're a main event faction, right? In a lot of ways, you see a lot of Queen's Quest versus DDM and a lot of pairing off and button heads there, because from a talent perspective, from a consistency perspective, from an overall presentation perspective, it doesn't get much better or complete than Queen's Quest. In my opinion, you liken them against DDM, and you've got faction wars for years And we're seeing a lot of that transpire over the last 18 months. I'll end it with our new faction, Cosmic Angels, right? And this is more of an, yeah. It's a newer faction. Again, Tam broke off from Stars because everybody betrays Mayu. And she brought in Mina Shirakawa from TJPW, as well as Unagi as well, who I believe was signed to TJPW. Is that right, JD?
Yes.
Okay, so she was signed to TJPW. Brought those two in, and they're kind of more of this, I'm going to butcher the word. They're more of this, kind of Guavier. Did I say that right? Guavier faction, where they're very more idealistic, right? They're more model-esque. And the nice thing is that with Tam being so concrete at the art of professional wrestling, both from storylines and from in-ring story being told through wrestling, as well as her overall skill set when it comes to wrestling, she kind of holds it down, right? And if she's holding it down, these other two are learning the ropes, right? Not so, their fundamentals aren't as clear or as clean as some of the others, but you can see that they're progressing, and they've done a good job of not shying away from that when they brought them in, and have shown you the progression of these wrestlers at the beginning of quote unquote their Stardom career to where they are now, 6 months, 8 months, 9 months later. And as a fan of professional wrestling, it's fun to follow those progressions, right? And so where they're a little on the older side, they're more of the model or idol kind of look to them, right? What we've seen evolve since the inception of Cosmic Angels is that Unagi has gotten better. Unagi, in my opinion, where she's certainly not going to blow your socks away with her offense, right? She eats so much offense. She sells for everybody. Her job is to go in there and just bump around the ring. And I think she does that on par with some of the best in the business today. Mina Shirakawa is night and day difference than what she was in TJPW. I mean, JD and I talk about it all the time, but the reason I stopped watching TJPW in late 2018, early 2019 was partly because of Mina Shirakawa and her wrestling ability. And she took great strides when I stopped watching TJPW, and she's taken even further strides since coming over and working with Milano over in Stardom. And so to watch their progressions since they signed has been a treat, to where they just fought each other for the future of Stardom Championship. I won't give any spoilers, but you can see that there's been investment in them, and that investment is going to continue. So we got 5 factions out in Stardom currently. It's a nice way of breaking up the roster. And more importantly, each faction brings something a little bit different. There's a little bit of a variant to each one of these factions. So if you're a fan of comedic stylings, DQs, blow off matches, things of that nature, you got a Oedo Tai. If you're into the main event, bangers with 4 or 5 star quality type of work rate, you have DDM and Queen's Quest. You got Mayu Iwatani, who's just the most lovable wrestler of all time, in my opinion, leading Stars, and everything in between. So a lot of good things happening within Stardom, within the factions. Each faction has its own individual way of looking at things. So definitely worth checking out.
So, I mean, that's, again, quite a good explanation of the factions there. There is something that I'll kick it over to JD here. I've heard of different mechanisms being used for people to be shuffled in between factions. Is there some kind of draft, perhaps, or is there some kind of reset that happens for members to switch between the factions?
So in the past, they would have kind of an annual draft, whether it was in a battle royale or situation where the last member eliminated, her faction's disbanded. New person would step up, they get a new one. But ever since the Bushiroad acquisition, they've definitely stepped away from that, and instead have utilized telling stories such as the more recent Oedo Tai Stars feud, which has gone on essentially since the takeover, as some fans might put it, where it's a systematic destruction of Stars because they keep losing the faction matches and members have to join Oedo Tai. So that's kind of where they're going now, and they're starting to tell more stories with possibly members getting disgruntled with their faction positioning. You can kind of, if you're a New Japan fan, see it as kind of the LIJ factor, where Evil just kind of got kind of sick of his position and started feuding with Naito, and that led to him leaving LIJ for Bullet Club. So, similar storytelling there in the sense of faction members leaving and joining other factions in general. So yeah, they've stepped away from the draft strategy, even though that was a very fun time in Stardom history.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything similar faction wise that we need to know about Tokyo Joshi Pro? Like, do they have a lot of that same kind of thing, or is it again more individual? I guess individual character base.
So yeah, it's very much individual character based. They don't really have factions. What they do have is tag teams.
Oh, okay.
What their booking strategy to keep it fresh is they always seem to find different names and tag teams to kind of stick people together with for a period of time. Yuka Sakazaki and Mizuki are the Magical Sugar Rabbits, probably one of the most popular acts in the promotion. You have now Miyu Yamashita, who is the champion, the pink striker. I think the best striker in Joshi currently. You fool JPQ and won't hear this nonsense. I am a Shuri fan, though. Don't get me wrong.
That's right. Yeah, it's 1 and 1A in a lot of ways.
I mean, if you want to not grow upset about it and really come to a conclusion, I'm going 1A and 2.
It's Shuri. I mean, she was in the UFC. She did it for real.
Used to be. I don't need your UWFI nonsense here. But anyways, yeah, Miyu Yamashita is now with Maki Ito, so they're a tag team for a little while, and they tell stories of the tag teams coming together, gunning for the tag titles. That creates an importance for the tag titles, and eventually them splitting apart or not. They can be together for a number of years. The Bakuratsu sisters are a tag team, and then when they want to do a trios, they'll bring someone in, maybe tell a story that way, come up with their own wacky name. For their trios, and it kind of builds off of that, and they have a history behind them all, and that's how they keep them fresh for a period of time. And Tokyo Joshi Pro also isn't afraid for the undercard to just be this kind of hodgepodge of a number of people, and because they're so strong at character work, they can change their heel face personas if you want to have it make sense within the confines of the promotion and the story of that match. So that's where Tokyo Joshi Pro is strong, is it's still fresh cards because they're not afraid to consistently have people tag in and out with each other and yet still have a well-told story of a tag team and creating singularity based on that as well.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's talk about titles as well, because obviously titles are important in wrestling sometimes. I guess I would hope that they're important.
They should be.
Not in Mexico, but
they should be important.
Not in Mexico, right? We can't throw that. That's a different place.
They should be important at the very least. So obviously we'll open up the can of worms known as Stardom here in a second, because I know there's a lot of titles in Stardom to cover. Let's go to Tokyo Joshi Pro first, and JD and JPQ, you both can pitch in on this one. Talk to me about the titles in Tokyo Joshi Pro.
Well, I mean, it's much more simple to understand. You got your top singles belt, you got your tag titles, and then you got your, I don't want to call it a mid-card title. I think that's very stereotypical, undermining definition that WWE has unfortunately installed in a lot of wrestlers and wrestling fan base. So it's the international belt. Its inception was for a lot of people from outside of Tokyo Joshi Pro to come in. Thunder Rosa is probably one of the more well-known names at this point in time, who had held it, had a feud with Maki Ito over it, which was very fun. I hope they bring that back. And the top belt is held by Miyu Yamashita, currently, Pink Striker. Easily probably one of the best in-ring in the promotion. You can throw a couple names in there if you want, but right now she is on top, and your tag titles is, I think that's the number 2 in the promotion currently. They're not afraid to have that main event shows. And those are your 1, 2, 3. It's very much more on the simple terms, and a lot of Joshi promotions are like that. Actually.
Right.
Okay. Hey, that makes sense. JPQ, the Stardom belts. There's a lot of them.
Yeah, you could say that. You could say that
It's
there's
not
a
as
lot.
complicated as you think, though.
No, it's very simple. And again, I mean, in a way of trying to streamline a lot of things, the fact that each title is colored makes for an easy representation to the viewer of trying to pick up and keep an eye on what's going on. So you have your World of Stardom Championship, otherwise known as your red belt. You have and that would be your top championship in Stardom. You have your Wonder of Stardom Championship, which is your secondary singles title. And I'll tell you that where to JD's point, your tag team title in TJPW tends to be your second title in a lot of ways. Wonder is that way for Stardom, right? So you see a lot of red belt, white belt, red belt, co-maining and main eventing a lot of the big shows, and that's by design. They really do put a value on one-on-one matches in Stardom compared to tag teams, although their tag team division is very good. Sticking with the theme of single titles, then you have your SWA Undisputed World Championship, and that is an interesting title because that's got a little gimmick to it where the holder of it can only defend it against people that aren't of the same nationality, right? So, for example, Shuri is half Filipino, half Japanese. And so because she's half Filipino, she can not just defend it against people that are Japanese, but she can defend it against anybody that's not Filipino in a lot of ways, right? And so that's fun because it's really more of a traveling title, right? And so we've seen over the years the SWA be held by the B. Priestleys of the world, the Jamie haters, and it allows for variety, not just for Gaijins coming in, but then if they decide to shop that title around and get Stardom's name out there a little bit more, gives the opportunity for it to travel a little bit, whether it be a Japanese holder or a Gaijin that came in on a quick tour. So that's a fun one to pay attention to right now. I'll tell you, the stock in the SWA title is as high as it's ever been because of the work that Shuri's done with it. And so the prestige of that title has only increased over the course of the last year or so. We have the high speed title, which is an old NEO, which is a defunct Joshi promotion title, which is more of their quick pace, lighter wrestlers. Think of it, I hate to correlate it to the cruiserweight division in WCW, but for the sake of conversation and this being a primer episode, that's an applicable representation for the people that are just getting into it. Then you have your Goddess of Stardom Championship, which is your tag team titles, right? Otherwise known as the Black Belts. They have a Future of Stardom Championship, which is if you've been wrestling for under 2 years within Stardom, 3 years? It is 3 years. Under 3 years within Stardom, you can compete for the Future of Stardom Championship. And they do a lot of tournaments, and it's fun when you see people that are almost ready to take that next step, and that's kind of a championing moment for them, letting you know that they're going to be the next on the roster to kind of move up the card if they win the Future of Stardom Championship. And the fun thing about the Future of Stardom Championship is if they give it to you, typically you hold it until you vacate it, right? Because if you're the top of the rookies or the top of the future stars, you pretty much stay the top of the future stars until you're ready to move on. So you don't see a lot with regards to that being defended and being lost a lot of the time.
It's a fun. I'll interrupt you because that's a really fun, interesting title, and it's a great concept. I wish more promotions would do that. Actually,
agreed.
Because it's a real big crowning moment for such a young wrestler, or at least young in experience,
right?
As well, and when you get that big vacated match to crown the new champion, it becomes a huge emotional moment for that wrestler, and you definitely feel their own sense of accomplishment. Namely, the most recent pay-per-view show from Stardom had Mina versus Unagi, and it's not like these matches aren't meant to blow you away, like because you don't expect that from a wrestler so young in the business, right? So when you get them finally winning this first sense of accomplishment from a singles level, you relate to it in a lot of ways from when you first accomplished something that you were just learning.
Right.
That kind of sense of night. I really like the concept of the future title, which was taken from All Japan Women in their AJW title. Same concept, it's the exact one, because that's where Rossi Bookerman cut his teeth in, was in All Japan Women from the 90s.
A lot of parallels between
80s and 90s.
Stardom and AJW in that regard. And then we finish off with the trios, right? Artist of Stardom Championship, home of the Orange Belt, Saki Kashima's belt. Where
belt, take that back.
I will tell you, and I don't watch a lot of Dragon Gate, so it's one of those things where Dragon Gate seems to be the one that seems to be most on par with what I'm about to say. But for my money, when it comes to trios matches, it doesn't get much better than Stardom, in my opinion, because of the consistency. Because when you're doing faction wars or faction warfare, or need to fill a card in a lot of different ways, you can phone a lot of these trio matches in as a card filler. But time and time again, the more you watch these matches, whether it be for the title or number one contendership or just a second match on the card, these tend to be some of the more fun matches that you're going to find. You really find the essence of Stardom in this kind of lighthearted, fun type of wrestling through their trios matches, and that's represented through these titles as well. So very polished, very clean, a lot of fun, good spots, a lot of camera shots in the sense that like they'll do 3-on-3 move sets in which they'll all be pulling the same submission, right? Or they'll be holding everybody against the ropes, and that gives good photo ops for people to take and things like that. And it just brings more fun to the party than more of your serious undertones that you find with like the Wonder or the World. The Artist of Stardom Championship, where it certainly can be to that caliber from time to time, typically lends on brings a a lot more levity to the situation or to the matches, which kind of yields a lot of the fun that you associate with Stardom and Joshi wrestling in general. So I think that that is the cornerstone. The trios division or the Artist of Stardom Championship is really the cornerstone of how people perceive or should perceive Joshi in a lot of ways, from how it makes you feel and how you react to that fun that you have when you watch it.
Yeah, Joshi has a lot of lucha libre to it, and that's where this really stems from, is lucha libre. Dragon Gate is a lucha libre based promotion essentially in Japan, and Stardom copying Dragon Gate yet again with trios matches. And you bet your ass we're going to see some AEW trios titles eventually. It's only been the talk of the talk for a good point of 18 months at least at this point in time. And if you don't think that's going to be a lucha libre based title, then a good place to start diving into is Stardom's trios titles. It's always a fun matchup when you get those, and it creates reasoning why you should pay attention to these 6-person tags, because who knows, maybe you'll get the next challengers. And the fact that it's a trios title, it also creates a sense of these titles could change at any time, because it's much more difficult to defend your title against 3 other people as opposed to 2.
Okay, I mean that makes sense. So I'll kind of ask maybe a slightly loaded question. I'm not 100% sure, because again, you guys are schooling me on this. I am definitely not the expert this episode. But I guess for both of you, and I'll start with JD. I guess are there big events? Are there things that you as a Joshi fan mark on your calendar every year that you're like, yeah, I got to make sure that I see this? Is there, I don't want to equate it to like a WrestleMania or a SummerSlam or anything like that, but are there these...
Get your WWE references out of this Joshi podcast today.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. But like, is there something in that same vein where it's like, man, this card is stacked, I know it's going to be stacked, or this is the big event in Joshi at the moment? Like, I guess what do you mark your calendar for as a Joshi fan?
Oh, I mean, if you want to talk about getting something on the ground floor, that it is now with a lot of these promotions. The top 3 Joshi promotions, that's Stardom is number 1, TJPW number 2, the towel I'm wearing on my shoulders right now, Ice Ribbon number 3. That's a much more difficult promotion to get into. I do want to plug the hell out of that promotion in a bit, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Go for it.
Later on. But as for times, I mean, if we're going to compare other promotions, we definitely got to compare to, say, New Japan and Dragon Gate in this sense. You always mark down the tournaments. Knockout or 5-star is your G1. Cinderella Tournament just ended for Stardom. That's your knockout tournament. That's your New Japan Cup. TJPW is just about to start their Cinderella Princess Tournament, Princess Cup. That's your knockout tournament. So always mark down the tournaments and your tournament final on your calendars. And then you got your big year-end events or your start events. Those generally take place these days at Corkin Hall. I'm sure we've all heard of that.
Yep.
Heard of that location. And being that these 3 promotions I mentioned are growing, it's going to start becoming Oda Ward, Budokan, hopefully. We saw Stardom hit up the Budokan earlier this year with a great hair versus hair match. My current match of the year. So if you haven't checked that match out, definitely check that.
I would also tend to agree that that's also my match of the year.
Hey, all right. I'm not alone. So yeah, Oda Ward, Budokan, Yokohama Budokan, Cork and Halls are generally bigger shows. And with Stardom on the ground floor, really kicking up because they're one of the few promotions, along with Tokyo Joshi Pro, that have actually grown during the pandemic because they started at such a small scale comparatively to a lot of promotions. You could make the argument that Stardom's about to become the number 3 if they're not already there, just behind Dragon Gate as the number 2 promotion in Japan.
Right.
Do you mark down your tournaments? You mark down your Cork and Halls that are generally built up once a month. For many companies like TJPW, they used to run that once a year in January. Now they're about to run Oda Ward. That's going to be where the Princess Cup's going to be. They have Tokyo Princess, so Tokyo Hall is another place. So you just mark down your big locations, much like you do with New Japan once a month. It's like, hey, we got Dominion coming up at, I believe that's at Budokan. There's so many venues, but anyways, you get what I'm saying. You got your big shows once a month generally that are built up for a big title match of some kind, and it's usually at a bigger venue than your Shinki but first your house shows, basically.
Okay, yeah, I mean that totally makes sense. So JPQ, expand on JD's explanation a little bit. The Stardom tournaments I know are vitally important to the promotion. So talk to me about the tournaments and kind of what are the differences and what do you typically expect from the tournaments?
Sure. Yeah. First and foremost, and I think this is probably true for all Japanese promotions, not just Joshi promotions, although, you do absolutely see this in Joshi, is that if you're a winner of a tournament, that means something, right? That's an accolade that carried with you, a lot like letters at the end of your name, right? If you win the 5-star Grand Prix, which is a lot like the G1 in New Japan, right? It's a 2-block, 10-person in each block tournament. You get assigned points based on the results. At the end, whoever has the most points in the block goes to the final, and after that, they get a shot at the red belt, right? Very linear comparison to the G1. But if you were to win the 5-star and you were to lose the red belt, you will forever be known as a 5-star champion, right? Like, it is an accolade that is carried with you, and you can obviously stock up victories within the G1, but a lot like when Naito wins in New Japan, or a lot like when Kenny Omega was winning it's something that's carried with you as part of your resume moving forward. And I think that Stardom does a great job with that, but then I will tell you a lot of Puro and a lot of Joshi companies, if you win something, even on a smaller scale, like Catch the Wave, right? If you win a Catch the Wave tournament from Wave Pro Wrestling, that's an accolade that is carried with you in a lot of ways, right? And so I love that aspect of it because it makes you want to pay attention to these things, right? At the same time, the storylines within these tournaments are also something worth paying attention to. They do a fantastic job, and I will give Stardom a lot of credit here because the 5-star, especially this year, is such a big event, right? I mean, it spans almost 7 weeks. So to kind of keep fans invested in that over a 7-week time can be a bit tiresome, right? There is a certain amount of energy that you need to keep if you're going to pay attention to that. It's like I'm watching the Tour de France right now, right? And whether I miss a day or not, it's a 3-week endeavor, right? That's every single day. And what are you going to do a little bit differently to make sure that I'm paying attention each and every single day? Stardom does a good job of that through their storytelling, right? It's not just the longer arcs that they're setting up via Utami Hayashishida is going to lose to somebody in her block, and that's going to be a championship match later and all that type of stuff. Yeah, you get that, right? And you can build stories off of that. But then we see a lot of stories brought in that are very, and I guess I can liken this to 2019, where we had Saki Kashima versus Natsu Samir. And I bring this up because this was a feud that JD and I spent a lot of time remunerating over for during that time frame. And it's one of those things where we saw the payoff, the rubber match during the 5-star, right? And that was a lot of fun. and then we saw different stories being told within the tournament themselves that ended by the end of the tournament, given certain wrestlers, right? And then we saw shorter term storylines being picked up towards the back end of these things to carry the undercard through post 5-star. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of you have to pay attention is really what I'm trying to drive at. And Stardom does a good job of interweaving these stories, both in ring as well as short term, long term arcs, from the mid card to the lower card to the main event scene, through these types of matches, right? At the same time, we've also seen injuries happen where they would need to pivot, right? And how things how they have to work in a little bit of a crisis mode to make sense of whatever their finale is come the blocks at the end. So if you can get solid booking and you can get an area where that they can keep it kind of feeling fresh over the course of these 7 weeks, I feel like there's a lot of successes there, and Stardom does that. They also do this Cinderella Tournament, which is very interesting because it is a knockout tournament, to JD's as JD described, but it's one where they bring a bit of balance to it in the sense that you can get knocked out by being pinned or submitted, but you can also get knocked out by being thrown over the top rope, right? You can also be knocked out because they're only 10-minute matches. So if you hit a draw, both people are eliminated, right? And so in a lot of ways, if you're a smaller wrestler or you're a not experienced wrestler, man, I'm going up against the champion. How am I ever going to win this? Well, you don't have to pin her, right? You can throw her over the top rope. You can take advantage of a situation and use that to your benefit to get that surprise upset. And that's why they call it the Cinderella, right? Because it's a dream in a lot of ways to a lot of these wrestlers. And so you get to see that picked up through this knockout tournament. That's just a little bit different than your conventional New Japan Cup and things of that nature. So that's a nice little wrinkle. But to JD's point, you got the Princess Cup, right? And that has its own set of rules. There's a couple other tournaments out there that just have these slight variations that, as a fan, you welcome because it's not as static as you're accustomed to seeing in a lot of other types of wrestling. And so that type of variation is a lot of fun. But that variation also allows for, intrigue and searching, right? And what I think is true for both me and JD is that where Stardom in a lot of ways is a gateway to get into Joshi, you begin to find these different promotions like an Ice Ribbon or a Marvelous or a Seedling or an Actress Girls, because everybody's doing something a little bit different, all based out of fundamentals, but everybody's doing something a little bit different, bringing a little bit of variation that gets you to ask, hey, what's that? Right? Especially in their tournaments, especially in during tournament season. So a lot of variety yields a lot of intrigue from the people that explore those avenues. So in a lot of different ways, you see that with the tournament season.
Sweet. Yeah, I can definitely dig that for Stardom. JD, regarding Tokyo Joshi Pro, I guess what are the mechanisms for the tournaments in Tokyo Joshi Pro? And then I'll let y'all introduce us to Ice Ribbon afterwards, so that way we can get an understanding.
A wide world. This is funny how I've become the champion of Tokyo Joshi Pro today. It's quite funny.
It's a little ironic, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the tournaments with Tokyo Joshi Pro, they generally are knockout, single elimination style brackets.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone loves putting together a good bracket. I don't think anyone can really disagree with that. March Madness saw the tag team tournament come down, and that's a lot of fun. I said it was a very tag team heavy promotion. That's what it comes across as. And then later in the year, you have your single knockout tournament for a more singles title aspect. Very simplistic, easy to follow. And if I was to recommend kind of how to dive into these promotions, say that both got your $10 a month, pick a couple wrestlers. Watch a show, watch one of the bigger shows that happens once a month generally these days. You pick your favorite tag team or favorite couple wrestlers. In Stardom's case, it's like almost picking your favorite sports team, and then you pick your favorite player on that team and you just follow them. And if you don't have the time to more or less keep up with entire shows, 5 stars coming up, you've just watched one of the more recent pay-per-views, or you've checked out a few matches on Stardom World, follow them throughout the 5 star. I'm not saying you have to follow all 7 weeks. I mean, when you watch promotions, you usually watch the two most popular days people tend to check out in general is the first day and the final day. Maybe check out those 2 days, and then in between follow your favorite wrestler, and that'll be a good way to kind of keep up with it all. But since Tokyo Joshi Pro is more knockout based, with both their tournaments, maybe fill out your bracket and follow along, just like March Madness.
All right,
the best way to do it.
Sounds good to me. I do like a good March Madness bracket, though I've never particularly been good to them.
Yeah, we're all terrible at them. Never goes the way you want.
So you've mentioned Ice Ribbon, and I'm getting the vibe that you prefer maybe prefer Ice Ribbon a little bit to Tokyo Joshi Pro.
So Ice Ribbon's actually my favorite Joshi promotion.
All right, sweet. Let's talk about it.
I've been covering ever since I discovered it a number of years ago. I've covered it every chance I get on the podcast, Redleaf Retrocast. There is no other wrestling podcast out there that I'm aware of that even covers Ice Ribbon on a month-to-month basis, let alone every single podcast episode. I am the Ice Ribbon podcast. I will champion myself for it. I think it also has the best style. It is the style I love the most. It is a much more hard hitting style. It is all about people moving up and down the card and creating stars. I'm not saying Stardom or TJPW doesn't create stars, but for my fandom, I think it creates the highest fandom, and it's got a do-it-yourself mentality about it in promotion, which is I find the business perspective of that side like very fascinating because there's such a small scale, but you still have to make money. And the best way to do that and to stay in business and to grow is to create the next level of stars. And they don't have the big backing as your cyber fight or your Bushi Road. It's just be happy with pro wrestling. It is you follow the card, and the undercard's going to be kind of a little wacky comedy. Mid card's going to be kind of your more tag team trios type stuff. You might even get a death match or hardcore match in there, depending on who's in there with. And then your main event is going to be your hard hitting sports presentation. Hard kicks to the back, just very good wrestling. I really enjoy it. And it's to me, it's one of the more easier ones to dive into from a style perspective. And who knows, maybe you find the comedy more. They got that. Maybe you got the hardcore stuff in there. They got that. And they got a good main event single scene. Now, financially, it's a little bit strange to get into, unfortunately, because it is a DIY type presentation. So there's a site called Nico Pro. And if you go, Joshi City is a website out there, just did a whole revamp of how to get into a number of different promotions, of where the pay-per-views are laid out, what service they're more associated with. And Nico Pro is kind of your indie style Puro and Joshi promotions you can get into. It's $5 a month, and then each promotion seems to also have their own archive, where you might get another subset of shows that'll come out on that, which is another $5 a month. So you got $10 a month. The best advice I give is sign up to the Promotions Nico Pro website.
Correct.
And then if they have a show that happens to also air on the Nico Pro wrestling site, then you can sign up for the extra $5. So in that sense, it's a low price point of entry. What a lot of promotions have been doing since the pandemic started is adopted the pay-per-view model for bigger shows. And those might run you via Nico Pro another $20, $30 a month, depending on the size of the show, the investment into it. I think every one of us can understand the business side of that.
Yeah.
And just imagine the old days, where WCW and WWF and WWE later as known, had monthly pay-per-views. Not so much. There you go, JoshiCity.com. Exactly. We all had to invest or wanted to invest, $20, $30, $40 a month for those big pay-per-view shows. Now a lot of these Joshi promotions are adopting a similar model to more or less help stay in business, which is I really appreciate that from the business side. And you don't have to buy every single one. Maybe every other month is a more financially wise thing for you to do. But you develop a good community like we have at Redleaf Retrocast. maybe you and your friends can kind of split off paying it all and, help each other out, so to say. Not a bad way to get into a promotion, I say, as everyone kind of chips in and you watch together. So that's good. And Ice Ribbon sometimes for a few shows has the KIP service, which is a very good service, costs a little bit more. That may be $35 a month for a pay-per-view. And they kind of, for that extra money, they want to build up an even larger match to really get your money's worth. That's their idea behind it. Very fun promotion. Does cost a little bit more. Just like Dragon Gate, it's a $15 a month subscription service as opposed to New Japan's $10. Kind of that same concept where it's a DIY promotion. It's going to cost you a little bit more to get into it, but for my bang for the bang for my buck, I think it's my favorite out there, and I think it gives me the best part of my fandom, and that's the one I've latched onto for the last number of years with them.
Sweet. I mean, I guess this opens up another corridor of questions. So I guess more Ice Ribbon specific. So I guess, is there a and feel free either of you to answer in your own ways, but is there a marquee event, or are there marquee wrestlers within Ice Ribbon that people like myself, uninitiated into Ice Ribbon, need to know about?
I'll hook you up with some excellent matches that have taken place this year. Some match of the year candidates in my mind, at least a couple of them that have stood out. Ice Ribbon is for my money. They don't do a lot of the old school mentality booking of a fresh star or a rookie has to cut their teeth for 3 to 7 years before finally getting a push. One of their top stars in their company is Suzu Suzuki, who's barely turned 19 years old, and she's already had a nice little six plus month reign with the top title of the company. So that's Suzu Suzuki, who's just went through the seven match deathmatch series with a number of other deathmatch wrestlers with the men. So Ice Ribbon's not afraid of intergender if it so pleases. They're not afraid of these women shedding some blood in the ring. We'll get your bloodlust pumping. I think we all like that. Our primal instincts kick in, and when you got a 19-year-old woman throwing thumbtacks into a dude, you're just like, yeah, go girl. Talk about some women empowerment. There it is. You got Tsukasa Fujimoto, who is the booker of the promotion. She's been there for over a decade. She's she's their top champion currently, and I think it's her 7th reign at this point. But when you follow the booking of this promotion, you know she's going to put over a future star of this promotion. The booking is so solid. It's arguably the best book promotion of 2021 so far. You can make an argument for a couple other promotions, but if you follow along Ice Ribbon, I think it's Booker of the Year right there, Tsukasa Fujimoto. Booker woman put herself on top. Take that for what it's worth as well. And then you got Risa Serra, who is unfortunately retiring this year. She's probably one of their biggest draws in the promotion. She's more of a hardcore wrestler, has just a strong crowd connection with her goofy personality. And you have Maya Yuki. She's kind of your beautiful fighter. Snow Princess is her nickname. She's got a very great style. This is where Julia came from. This is where she cut her teeth in before she moved on to Stardom, seeing that opportunity rise. Hikaru Shida cut a lot of her career. She started in Ice Ribbon as well. Perhaps you've heard of one Hikaru Shida there, Tanner.
I have heard of Hikaru Shida.
This is where she comes from. This is where she got her start. She started with Tsukasa Fujimoto. It's a great promotion. Lots of stars being made. The tag titles are they easily main event. You could argue at times it's just as important as the main singles title. And they've recently introduced over the last year the Fantastice title. That is their version of the white belt these days. And this title's gimmick is outstanding. Whomever holds the title has like carte blanche on the rules for the title. So Risa Serra is the first champion, and anytime she defends this title, it's going to be a death match. So now it's in its current form, it's a death match title.
Wow.
So the most recent defense was Risa Serra against Rina Yamashita in a light tube death match. So if you're into I see your eyes getting raised there. They are doing things that no other Joshi promotion is doing. They create themselves a nice uniqueness to a lot of the other promotions. So if you notice something about all three of these promotions, Stardom, it's your work rate promotion. Great storytelling, great booking. You got Tokyo Joshi Pro. It's got good booking. It's got a great financial backing, nice stability, more character-based. And Ice Ribbon, I think, is more, it's got more variety to it. It's got star power. It's got a DIY promotion that you can really get behind, get behind the little guys kind of mentality. It's like no one wants to root for the Lakers all the time. Maybe you want to root for the Utah Jazz. Root for the small market. No? JPQ, you know me, I got to slip my Utah Jazz reference.
I know you do.
Yeah, as a San Antonio Spurs fan, I can appreciate that, So, yeah, absolutely. As we kind of wind down things here on this Joshi primer, so obviously people who are WWE fans or AEW fans even, you're gonna know names like Asuka, like Io Shirai, like Kairi Sane, like Hikaru Shida. But I guess who should people be looking to now in Joshi wrestling? If you're like, hey, I've got a feeling that this star here in this promotion is going to come to the West, or hey, we should really be paying attention to this star here in this promotion.
You've unleashed quite the topic here.
Yes, give me some names, fellas. I'll start with JPQ. Who should we be paying attention to right now in Joshi wrestling?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I'm gonna go with Mio Momono from Marvelous. I think as far as work rate goes, and the next up and comer to kind of really begin to steal the show from a lot of different people out there, I think it's Mio Momono. She's 23 years old. She's been wrestling forever. She's only 4'11". She's got this high speedness to her, but she's got this tenacity to her. When she wrestles, 1,000%. She would run through a brick wall. In a lot of instances, depending on who she's wrestling, she is, right? And she's got this huge match coming up against the Sendai champion, Chihiro Hashimoto. And it's David versus Goliath in a lot of ways. And whether she wins or she doesn't, we'll find that out tomorrow, right? The 11th, right, is when the match is. That's coming up. Marvelous is a promotion that's run by Chigusa Nagayo, and she's just an absolute legend. She's probably the most famous of all Joshi wrestlers. She, from a technical perspective, when she wrestled, she was the best, right? In a lot of ways, she was the absolute best. She was the wrestler, right, of the late 80s, early 90s. In my opinion, JD, damn it. But I liked her. I liked her a lot. Anyway, my point is
definitely
that
the most popular. I can't
certainly
argue
the most popular.
Nobody can argue that. That's impossible. You meet someone who argues Chigusa Nagayo wasn't the most over, they don't know what they're talking about.
Right. No, she certainly is the most over wrestler of Joshi of all time. But she's got a nice little roster going, right? Mio Momono being the one that I think is going to be the breakout soon enough. Rin Katakura, who's on the precipice of becoming the next main eventer for Marvelous. They have a partnership with Stardom, so you can go back and see a little bit of their matches in Stardom if you have Stardom-World. But Marvelous is a nice little. I'm very endearing when I say this because some people take this the wrong way. But as far as indie promotions go in Joshi, kind of more of that stripped down presentation, focus more on the technical aspect of wrestling, basic storytelling, things of that nature. I think Marvelous does it more consistently, better than everybody else. And I put a lot of that on their younger wrestlers in a lot of ways, right? Mio Momono, May, I always say her name wrong.
Oshizuki,
thank you. As well as Rin Katakura. They have a nice core that they're building around for the future. As well as complementary pieces on a 12-person roster. I would say keep an eye out for her. On top of that, I would tell you that Actress Girls has Miyuki Takase, and she's very, very impressive. In fact, we saw Rin Katakura versus Takase in the Catch the Wave final, and that was a nice banger of a match. And what you saw there was two women in their mid-20s who are looking to break out, right? And whether they get that opportunity or don't get that opportunity is really depending on the booking of their respective promotions. However, the talent is there, and you can see that from a draw perspective, that provided that the intent and ambition stays high with both of them, that their ceiling is very high from what they're able to do within the rope. So a lot of good things coming out of the Joshi quote unquote independent scene, which again, probably not the best way to put it, but Rin Katakura, Takase, and Mio Momono are people on the come up that people really should be paying attention to, because that's the next crop of strong talent working its way up the Joshi scene.
Sweet. And I got to make a side note here, because it's been an absolute treat watching the reactions between both you and JD as the other says something to see if it's valid or not. This has been actually wonderful for those wanting a visual at home. So JD, would you generally agree with JPQ here, or are there things that maybe you would switch up and say, hey, no, you should be looking at these people here?
Well, I mean, this is a cheap plug here, and I'm not afraid of cheap plugs, because like I said at the top of the podcast, is Redleaf Retrocast, and our Patreon is so dedicated to bringing a perspective of a business side into especially Joshi wrestling. It's a very under-talked topic, because for so long there was no money involved. It was in just the doldrums. Promotions coming and going, out of business, and we really break down and learn booking blueprints, lack of booking, card making, stars just not being made, veterans just never putting young talent over. What JPQ's saying from talent perspective, the Joshi scene is incredible. Mio Momono, Miyuki Takase are for Veni, Asuka Veni,
Huge.
Like these three are you just know they're on the verge of a breakout.
Right.
But with Joshi wrestling's history, I'll just kind of leave it at that. You really want to see these wrestlers succeed, and with Stardom and Tokyo Joshi Pro, and then AEW with its Tokyo Joshi Pro connection, you really feel that these two promotions are the ones to pay attention to, and Ice Ribbon just in its own right. With its own limitations, you want to pay attention to the wrestlers in those promotions and who you want to see end up in those promotions. Hate to say it, but I like Marvelous's roster, but there's an inherent ceiling to the star power and the booking blueprints of these promotions. Chihiro Hashimoto, she's a tremendous talent over in Sendai Girls. Much harder promotion to get into, much harder promotion to sink your teeth into. There needs to be a realization of what these promotions are capable of bringing for investment and over a long period of time in a month-to-month basis. I'm an indie wrestling fan. I like Beyond Wrestling. I go to Limitless in Maine a lot. There is a ceiling to what star power these wrestlers have, and you really want to see the wrestlers graduate from Beyond and end up in like an AEW or even a WWE. You want to see these wrestlers get bigger and better, stronger, faster. With Mio Momono, for my fandom, I'd love to see her in Stardom, because I think there's just an inherent ceiling to what Marvelous is capable of, and I think we can all agree to that at the very least. Is she someone to pay attention to? 100%. Go out of your way to watch a high profile, I'll put that in quotes, match. Chihiro Hashimoto versus Mio Momono is coming up tomorrow in Sendai Girls. That's probably one of the bigger independent women's wrestling matches that you'll see. Now, whether outside the vacuum that means to big business being drawn and whatnot, we'll save that for another conversation. Listen to Redleaf Retrocast for that kind of content. But should you absolutely pay attention to a match like that? Of course. That's going to be a great match, no doubt in my mind. JPQ is probably going to watch it tomorrow, or when he gets his hands on it and finds the time. Absolutely.
Always.
Takase and Asuka Veni. Asuka Veni's current seed ring champion. I'll leave my opinions over that promotion to the side for now, but that she's going to be defending against Ryo Mizunami coming up in the semi-main event. Despite that being a title match. But Ryo Mizunami, we saw her in AEW and probably might see her more in the future. she cut a lot of her teeth in Wave and Ice Ribbon. Riho comes from Ice Ribbon. Emi Sakura started Ice Ribbon. She's the founder. When you get on the ground floor, a lot of these promotions, and then you see them graduate and maybe move on to a Stardom or a TJPW, you'll just see their growth and star power grow with them. I really like the names JPQ threw out there. I'll throw out Chihiro Hashimoto and Ryo Mizunami as some other names to pay attention to.
Yeah, and if I can just hop in here real quick, and just so I can go seedling to JD.
Don't infuriate me.
I'm gonna go Arisa Nakajima as well.
Okay, yeah.
You talk about a class act, in her 30s, crushing it. She's on the level, and when I say this, I mean from a prestige perspective, in my opinion. Right now, JD mentioned before, like a Tsukasa Fujimoto, right? And there's a couple people out there that'll tell you that Tsukasa Fujimoto is better than your favorite wrestler, right? And she is in a lot of ways. Yeah. Arisa Nakajima, where I'm not going to say she's the best wrestler in the world or that she's to the level of Tsukasa Fujimoto, but she's considered to be part of that elite tier, right? In a lot of ways, right? Not just from running, but just her overall skill sets and everything that. That 5-tool player that we talk about in professional wrestling, she hits all those check boxes. So Arisa Nakajima, you don't see a tremendous amount of her because Seedling only runs, anywhere between 25 to 30 times a year before the pandemic, and they're starting to get back to a little bit more consistency after the pandemic. But Arisa Nakajima is as good as anybody going right now in a lot of ways. Tsukasa obviously still much better, but she's elite tier for sure.
Oh, sweet. I mean, I've had to take so many notes here on my phone of like, okay, I have to check out this, and now I'm going to look into this. So this has been definitely a revelation. Yeah, I think that's the right word there. It's been a revelation.
There you go.
Getting to hear all this here as an outsider, kind of getting this. Again, primer, as we've used the word here, into Joshi wrestling. JD, you've done an excellent job at the plugs here. So, what is Redleaf Retrocast for those who are uninitiated? Where can our listeners find more of you and your content?
So, Redleaf Retrocast is a modern and retro wrestling, gaming, and anime podcast. We do a lot of content. Everything comes out weekly on a bi-weekly release schedule. If that makes sense. So we make sure there's at least one episode every week from one of those 3 contents. And then we got a Patreon, which covers a lot of historical stuff. My partner in crime, Kay, he does JD Star, which is a Joshi promotion from 2001 that's now defunct. I started a journey of covering episodes monthly of LLPW, Legends Ladies Pro Wrestling, which is an almost shoot women's promotion from the early 90s. I've been doing a lot of Starcade reviews, kind of filling that gap in history, maybe going into a lot of historical stuff of NWA and WCW. Redleaf Retrocast wrestling content. Since this is a wrestling one, we cover 7 promotions every single episode. AEW, New Japan, Dragon Gate, DDT. There's your men's. Every single episode we go into Stardom, Tokyo Joshi Pro, and Ice Ribbon. No other wrestling podcast does anything like that on a per episode basis, especially from the Joshi scene. We cover 3 promotions, and then we have a recommended section where we get into a lot of the indies. So on the next episode, you're going to find Catch the Wave. You're going to find Actress Girls. You might even find some Oz Academy and Seedling. Who knows what you might get, but that's for that section of the podcast. And then we got a retro section that back ends every podcast that does all Japan women from the 90s. We've reached the 90s. We've gone through the 80s. Now we're in the 90s. This is when the Dave Meltzer 5-star stuff started going crazy. This is what probably a lot of people are familiar with. So we do all Japan women, and one of the more famous Joshi promotions of all time. Followed up with New Japan from the 90s. And then we back end it with WCW. We're in 1999 currently. And you want to talk about feeling despair? That is a failing promotion. And we have a lot of fun just going to town on that sucker. That is some bad times. So we got a lot of content. And everything includes timestamps in the description. So if you just want to listen to Stardom be covered in every episode, we got a timestamp. You can just go straight to it. And that's what it's for. I don't expect everyone to listen to all 3 to 4 hours of this thing. Just pop into what you want to listen to, what interests you, try something out. That's what I encourage. And hey, what our Patreon is really primed for is our Joshi 2010s journey. This is a journey through the 2010s over when Joshi Wrestling came out of that dark age and is slowly growing up. What promotions start cropping up and growing business-wise and creating stars. A lot of stars you see today in your promotions, your Io Shirai, your Riho, your Hikaru Shida, all started getting their star power in the early 2010s, and we're just going through it. That's $1.50, and if you don't want to help us out, Kay's Big Egg Joshi podcast, those release later for free over on his, because this is a period of time that needs to be covered, historically covered, and we even put out some videos on the Daily Motion page so we don't get crapped on of key matches from these eras. So you can go over that. That's Redleaf Retrocast Daily Motion. So this is all, if you want your women's wrestling content, we're your place.
Sweet. And I remember participating in a WCW review.
I'm so sorry I did that to you.
I was part of one of those too.
It is a very good time. So if you yourself are a content creator and you despise WCW, hit up JD, and I'm sure he can help hook you up with some good times over on Redleaf.
Don't you forget it, Tanner. I'm going to hook you up with some ice ribbon matches here after this.
Ooh, I'm looking forward to it because I've got nothing to do but edit today, and I need something to watch. So I'm very excited. JPQ, you are retired, semi-retired. I mean, what you got going on, man?
I got nothing but wrestling. It's been fun in that regard, right? So a lot of leaving the content creatorship world was because of time. Time per hit, I didn't have the time, right? Still
Too
really
busy
don't.
Pumping out kids and repopulating the planet.
Pretty much. And so, still running that pretty good, but it has allowed me to kind of venture in to different promotions and kind of realign my focuses with what I enjoy about wrestling instead of looking at it in a way that I used to. So, I'll spend this quick time plugging the Joshi promotions that we're talking about. So, obviously best in class in a lot of ways. We're talking about Stardom with presentation and depth within the roster and overall work rate and things of that nature. There's a lot from Stardom. I use Stardom as the gateway into Joshi for a reason. Accessibility, presentation, match quality, depth of roster, best in class in a lot of ways with Stardom. TJPW checks a lot of those boxes with regards to accessibility, as well as it's a fun promotion that focuses a lot on in-ring on a lot of storytelling and a lot of character work, and not so much, although definitely improving on the in-ring side. So if you fancy more of that, TJPW is something worth checking out. If you're a fan of best in the world as well as variety in your shows, Ice Ribbon is somewhere that you want to kind of make your home, because from a co-main main event perspective, it doesn't get much better on a more consistent basis than those two, than Ice Ribbon. But there's a tremendous amount of.
I will interrupt you for a second, JPQ. If anyone listening wants to hit us all up on Twitter to get further into Ice Ribbon, don't hesitate to ask any of us, and we'll guide you along.
Yeah, we'll push you in the right.
More than willing to help out.
Yeah. And then you got your Joshi Indies. And again, not to take up too much time, but you got Seedling. So if you're a fan of, Arisa Nakajima, if you've seen Asuka Veni on Twitter and you're interested more in what she's doing, if if you're a fan of Nane Takahashi from back in the day, Seedling's something worth checking out. And I'll tell you, from an accessibility perspective, seedlinglive.com is one of the easier pay-per-view services to buy through. Knowing that you're going to be buying through a Japanese satellite, right? And so they're more linear with how you can purchase their shows and watch their shows. Actress Girls is on Nico Pro, and they're doing some really interesting thing with different two different rosters, two different championships, and two different styles going at the same time. So that's definitely something worth checking out. Got to Move is on YouTube. That's Emmy's promotion, and that's just tremendous fun. And that's something completely different than anything anybody's doing right now. Pro Wrestling Wave has like 5 people, and it has the legend Sakura Hirota, who is just a comedy genius. So if you like more of the fun type of wrestling with funny spots and cosplay and things like that, Wave's definitely something worth investing your time into. Marvelous is, in my opinion, the most polished of all these independent Joshi promotions. It's a little more stripped down. The wrestlers are definitely on the come up, but you see the progressions and you see the next up in a lot of places, in a lot of ways in Marvelous. And then you've got Oz Academy, which if you're a fan of Ozaki or you're a fan of that Oedo Tai type of style where it's just a match that begins and then it just becomes a cluster right off the bat where everybody just beats the living crap out of each other for 40 minutes and then nothing really formulates with regards to storyline. Oz Academy's for you. And then Sendai Girls is kind of coming back, right? And people know Sendai from IWTV. Maybe you were a Shikara fan back in the day, you know, and you got a little bit of FaceTime in front of Sendai Girls. They're kind of in this new phase now that Mako's kind of moving on to NXT UK. And so the big question with Sendai is going to be, are we going to finally begin to see the investment into their roster to see these people begin to progress and become draws and make money? Or is it going to be a lot of the same kind of complacency that we saw when Mako was leading the charge the last 15 years? Now, that's not a knock, right? Because the fact that they've been in business this long is a win. But are we going to begin to see kind of those reins loosening a bit and letting some of her talent flourish? You know, that's kind of the new era of Sendai Girls that we're in. So exciting time for them as well. Each and every one of these promotions brings something different for different fandoms out there. So, you know, if you're new to Joshi, if you're intimidated by Joshi, there's a good community out there to help support whatever you like and guide you in the right direction if you're willing to ask. So be brave out there, everybody.
Absolutely. And if they wanted to approach you about said conversation, what would be the easiest means of getting in touch with you?
On Twitter at Big Paws on a Pup.
There you go. And of course, JD's at Bowling JD on Twitter. Definitely
Very
hit
easy.
him up.
Or Redleaf Retrocast, either or search. You can easily find me. DMs are open. Don't hesitate. More than willing to help. There's also Blue_Kano. He's more than willing to help out as well. He's my partner in crime, as I mentioned before. His name's Kay. He does the Big Egg Joshi podcast, a big podcast out there to plug as well. He's more than willing to help out. Actress Girls is his favorite promotion out there, next to Ice Ribbon as well. He's got a good reputation out there of helping any number of fans just trying to get into Joshi wrestling.
Well, fellas, first off, I can't thank you enough for joining me today and us having this conversation, because you've truly enlightened me on a subject that I'll be honest, I'm just not that good at. And so this was a nice turn of pace for me to get schooled on something that, again, I have struggled with previously in trying to get into. And I think that you've made it not only easier for me, but for a lot of folks out there who've never ventured into Joshi wrestling to go ahead and do so, because it is a fascinating community. It is a fascinating, I guess, subsection of wrestling to get into, and a lot of high quality matches for sure. The more that companies like Stardom, Tokyo Joshi Pro, and Ice Ribbon have progressed over the years, and the more that I see about it on my timeline on Twitter, I'm like, I gotta find a way to get back into this somehow and figure it out, you know. But it's been an honor and a pleasure. Obviously, JPQ, you and I have known each other for years.
Yeah.
At this point, and so I appreciate you as a mentor, and both of you as contemporaries, as I put Headlock Talk in the rearview mirror. But I want to thank you guys again for tuning in. You guys can hit us up on Twitter at Headlock Talk if you have any questions about this episode. Obviously, if you're listening to this on the stream, and if you haven't subscribed, I mean, go ahead and subscribe, I guess, if you want to. That way, so you can always have the episodes. If you're listening to this on Love Wrestling, make sure you subscribe to Love Wrestling. Everybody over there is awesome. So you should make sure to hit that up as well, and go check out the content if you can find it by these two gentlemen. They're absolutely awesome. So everybody, y'all take care, be safe out there, know that I love you, and have yourselves a great rest of your day. Bye bye.